Good day everyone, and welcome to WILDchild Television. My name is Jarryd, and I'm one of the head guides here at andBeyond Private Game Reserve, South Africa. And this is Becoming a Ranger, Tracks and Signs. On the first episode of Tracks and Signs, we looked at some of the basics of tracking and what is tracking. Today we're going to head out, see what tracks we can find, and see how to identify them. So when looking for tracks, we'll often move into an area where we know there's a high movement of animals. Either an open area where you know lots of grazers are moving to, or water sources where a lot of animals are heading down to have a drink. So another really good place to come look for tracks is on what I like to call an animal highway. So it's basically just a game path that over many years animals have traveled along a particular path to and from water. Unfortunately, on this path it is very difficult to see the tracks because the path itself is very muddy, but on the path I can see that elephants, hippo, rhino and a couple of other animals have walked along. So here we have a track of a blue wildebeest. It's a fairly large track, which is about 100 millimeters long. You'll notice with the track that it's got a bit of a triangular shape to it, and that shape would give you the direction that this wildebeest was walking in. So that's the front of the foot, and then the wider area is towards the back. Now with blue wildebeest, you'll often notice that there is a noticeable gap between the leading edge of the track, so the front of the track. So this track is caused by the fastest land mammal. You guessed it, a cheetah. Now something that is very important to note about a cheetah's paw is that it is perfectly designed to run the very fast speeds that it runs at. We know that this is a cheetah track because it is a very long but thin track. The total length of the track is around 105 millimeters. Now something that is very interesting about the paws of a cheetah is that the back paw is larger than the front paw. Now this is very different to the other cats who all have larger front paws and smaller back paws. So when looking at the track, you'll also notice that there are claw marks. This is because a cheetah has semi-retractable claws. When looking at the main pad of a cheetah, it has a slight indentation on the leading edge. The posterior edge has 3 well-defined lobes extending a little up the main pad. This track is the largest track you'll see, and it is caused by the largest land mammal on earth. You guessed it, an African elephant. An adult elephant bull will have a track length of around 500 millimeters and a width of around 472 millimeters. Although an elephant has 5 toes on the front foot and 4 toes on the hind foot, in the track you'll only see what looks like 1 toe mark. Inside the track, you'll see what looks like a wrinkled pattern. This is caused by the sole of the feet that is rough and cracked. If you look at the back area of the track, you'll notice that these wrinkled patterns are much smoother than the rest of the track. This is formed by a thick layer of cartilage that is at the back of the foot of the elephant. Although the back and front foot have the same length, you'll notice that the front foot has a very round shape, whereas the back foot has a very oval shape. This track is caused by the most naughty animal in the bush, a vervet monkey. When I look at this track, I can't help but think that it looks like a baby human's track, but with very long fingers and toes. Both front and hind feet have 5 digits with an opposing thumb. When looking at the back foot, the toes are tightly grouped together and has a very long but narrow main pad. This main pad on the hind foot is in fact the monkey's heel. When looking at the front foot, the toes are very long and slightly more sprayed than the back foot, and the main pad is about half the size of that of the hind foot. This track is caused by a very spiky rodent and is in fact my favorite of all the tracks because the track is as strange as the animal that caused it. This track has been made by a porcupine. When looking at the main pad, you'll notice that it is very segmented, and behind the main pad is 2 proximal pads. Although a porcupine has 5 front and hind toes, in a track you'll generally only ever see 4 toes and 4 claw marks. And each of these toes will be typically round in shape. The typical track length for a porcupine will be between 70 to 80 millimeters. So here we have a track of a white rhino, but how do you tell the difference between the tracks of a white rhino and a black rhino? So the tracks of a white rhino is noticeably larger than that of a black rhino, in fact about 50 to 70 centimeters longer. The 2 side toes of a black rhino is smaller and situated further back from the middle toe. The V of a white rhino is more noticeable than that of a black rhino. In a clear substrate, the creases on a white rhino is more noticeable than a black rhino, and the overall shape of a black rhino track is more round as opposed to the box-shaped track of a white rhino. One can also easily confuse the tracks between a hyena and a cheetah because they both have 4 toes and their claw marks are present in their tracks. When looking at the difference in the shape of the toes of a cheetah are oval shaped, whereas the toes of the hyena are kidney shaped. Probably the easiest way to tell the difference between a cheetah and hyena track is to look at the posterior edge. The posterior edge of the hyena track only has 2 lobes, one lobe much larger than that of the other, whereas a cheetah has 3 lobes, very similar in shape. Although lion and leopard tracks do look very similar, one shouldn't confuse the 2 tracks. This is because the tracks of a lion is much larger than that of a leopard. That being said, the tracks of a lion cub could easily be misidentified as a leopard track. When comparing lion cub tracks with that of a leopard, the tracks of a lion cub is broader and have a more distinct inset in the 3 lobes. And when looking at the spacing between the toes and the main pad, the spacing between the toes and the pad of the lion cub will be much wider. When looking at a leopard track, the main pad has an indentation on the leading edge, which is not visible on the leading edge of a lion track. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Becoming a Ranger Tracks and Science. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode, where we're going to look a lot closer at some of the science that animals leave behind.